Have you ever wondered why some people start to distance themselves just when you begin to find clarity? Why the air changes, cold glances, short replies, a sudden shift in how they treat you as if your progress has become their discomfort? It's not always about what you did wrong. Sometimes it's about what you did right. Because when you grow, when you rise, when you finally stop shrinking to fit into the spaces you've outgrown, it unsettles those who are more comfortable with your confusion than your clarity. See, your growth doesn't just impact you, it reverberates through the atmosphere around you. It sends ripples into the lives of those who have remained in place while you dared to move. It confronts their complacency. And that confrontation, it's rarely welcomed. There are people who liked you better when you were broken, when you needed them, when your uncertainty made them feel superior. But when God begins to lift the veil from your eyes, when you start stepping boldly into your calling, that's when the shift begins. Suddenly, those who once clapped for you become suspiciously silent. Those who once called you friend now call you competition. It's not because you became a bad person. It's because you started becoming you, the healed you, the focused you, the version they never expected to see. And that version doesn't play small anymore. That version doesn't stay where it's safe. That version doesn't bow to comfort zones or live to make others feel at ease. Some people loved you only as long as you stayed inside the box they built for you. The moment you outgrew it, the moment your dreams spoke louder than their doubts, you became a threat. Your elevation exposed their stagnation, your drive revealed their distractions, and instead of being inspired, they became offended. Offense turns into distance. Distance, if left unaddressed, becomes bitterness, jealousy, even hate. But please don't take it personally. You are not responsible for someone else's insecurities. You are not called to diminish your light so others don't feel overshadowed. This is spiritual. When God increases His hand on your life, when He starts opening doors your past tried to shut, not everyone will celebrate. Some will say you've changed, but what they really mean is you've been set free. You're no longer bound, no longer available to their drama, no longer dancing to the rhythm of their insecurities. People will sit with you in your valley, but many will disappear when God sets you on a mountaintop. Pain creates connection, but purpose causes conviction. And when you begin walking in your purpose, it amplifies what others are ignoring in themselves. You're not boasting, you're not better, but your glow reminds them of the fire they've let go, dim. And that has a cost. Growth always does. Sometimes it's not money or time, it's people. It's relationships that once felt like home, now feeling like a weight. It's conversations that once uplifted, now leaving you drained. It's friends who walked with you in your wilderness but refused to follow you into your promised land. It hurts, I know, but don't resist the pruning. God is not subtracting to punish you, He's subtracting to protect you. Not everyone who starts with you is called to finish with you. So bless those who walk away. Love them, forgive them, but don't chase them. Their leaving isn't your failure, it's your confirmation. You've moved into a space they're not willing to enter. Some people fell in love with your brokenness. Your confusion made them feel needed. Your uncertainty gave them importance. But you're not that person anymore. You're not confused. You're not broken. You're not living for the applause of the crowd, you're walking for the approval of the King. So when someone ghosts you, mocks you, or subtly tries to undermine your progress, ask yourself, what did I grow out of that they're still clinging to? What version of me are they grieving while I'm already living as someone new? And more importantly, what is God making space for by removing what no longer belongs in my next chapter? There's something sacred about silence, but many misunderstand it. When you stop explaining, stop defending, stop performing for people, you create space. And in that space, some will write their own stories. Stories of offense, of betrayal, of assumptions. But your silence isn't a weapon. It's a witness. A declaration that you no longer owe anyone a performance. That's when the tension rises. Not because you hurt them, but because you outgrew needing their validation. Maturity brings peace. And peace? Peace is loud to those addicted to chaos. Your calm threatens those who thrived on your crisis. They were only ever comfortable when you were insecure, anxious, needy. The moment you no longer depend on their approval, they feel it. They feel the shift, and they panic. You don't owe them a reaction. You don't owe them a seat in your future just because they showed up in your past. Some people thrive off the access they had to your emotions, but you're not their puppet anymore. You're healed. You're rising. You're free. And they're not all ready to see you like that. But God is. Keep walking. Don't look back. What's ahead is worth everything you had to release to get here. Have you ever noticed how some people become more distant not because you've done something wrong, but because you finally stop needing to explain yourself? When you no longer overshare, when you stop pleading to be understood, when you decide to stop trying to translate your heart into a language someone has already chosen to misunderstand, that's when the shift happens. And it's loud, not in words, but in tension. Because peace, real peace, provokes those who relied on your chaos. Choosing stillness, choosing to stop arguing and start living, doesn't sit well with everyone. Not because you've turned cold, but because you've stepped into a power they can't control. Your silence, though quiet, echoes in their insecurity. It forces them to confront parts of themselves they've worked hard to ignore, the jealousy they mask with fake smiles, the comparisons they never dared admit, the resentment they buried beneath shallow support. And now, they don't know what to do with you. So, they say you've changed. They say you're cold. They say you're distant. But the truth? They're uncomfortable. They don't know how to function without your constant need for their validation. And this is where your silence becomes not just necessary, but holy. Sometimes, silence is the boundary that keeps your peace intact. Not to hurt, not to ignore, but to protect. Protect your spirit. Protect your calling. Protect your mind from the constant noise of others' expectations. There are seasons where God calls you to say less because your next move isn't meant to be broadcast, it's meant to be blessed. Some people can't handle that. They're used to seeing your struggle, your tears, your breakdowns. And now that you've stopped bleeding in front of them, they call it betrayal. But it's not. It's healing, it's strength, it's growth. They'll say you're arrogant. They'll whisper that you've got an attitude. And maybe you don't attitude of peace. An attitude that understands silence doesn't mean defeat, it means discernment. Not every battle is worth fighting out loud. Not every truth needs to be defended. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to say nothing and keep moving. People panic when they can't read you anymore. When your eyes stop pleading and your mouth stops explaining, it shakes them because their confidence was never in your strength. It was in your weakness. They felt big when you felt small. They felt secure when you felt lost. And now that you've found your footing, now that you've built boundaries they can't cross and closed doors they used to waltz through, they feel powerless. And that powerlessness turns to hate. Let them talk. Let them speculate. Let them fill in the blanks. Your silence is not rejection, it's redirection. It's God saying, I'll speak for you now. It's Him reminding you that your validation doesn't come from the crowd, it comes from heaven. The very people who now criticize your quiet were never really listening when you spoke. They weren't invested in your healing, only in your hurt. And now that you're not pouring pain into their hands, they call you distant. But you're not distant. You're discerning. You're no longer obligated to explain your growth to those committed to misunderstanding. You don't have to answer to people who've already made up their minds. You don't have to feed conversations that exist only to dissect, not to understand. Sometimes, silence is salvation. It's strength wrapped in stillness. And Yesem will hate you for it. They'll hate that they no longer have access to your thoughts, your plans, your fears, but that's okay. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be obedient to the one who's leading you forward. So let them wonder. Let them whisper. You found peace, and peace doesn't need an explanation. Keep walking, keep rising. Let your silence make the statement your words no longer need to. In mark, turn in compliments. It lingers in the uncomfortable silence after you share good news. It hides behind eyes that won't meet yours when you talk about the goodness of God in your life. It's not always loud, but it's always present. And more often than not, the hate you suddenly feel from others isn't really about your flaws, about your growth, your favor, your resilience. The fact that you had the audacity to believe your life could hold more than what they settled for. See, when someone's heart is full of disappointment and they see you walking in purpose, it stirs something in them. They start comparing their stagnation to your progress. And instead of reflecting, instead of seeking God about their own hearts, they project, they lash out, they grow cold. They twist your joy into arrogance, your passion into pride, your discipline into performance, because any of it is true, but because it numbs the pain of not trying. Some people don't hate you, they hate the reflection of everything they gave up on. When they see you rise after a fall, stay faithful through heartbreak. Pour your soul into your college. It confronts their abandoned dreams, their dismissed potential, their untaken paths. But instead of letting that confrontation inspire change, it breeds resentment. This world teaches us to compete, compare, and measure. But the truth is, your purpose is not in competition with anyone. You're not trying to outshine them. You're simply allowing your light to shine, just as God intended. But when people are used to shadows, your light feels like an attack. Your obedience to God offends those ruled by fear. Your consistency unnerves those who quit after one setback. Your joy feels fake to those who haven't felt hope in a long time. But don't let that discourage you. The hatred they hurl at you is often their own unresolved pain. Their grief over lost years, their anger at missed chances, their bitterness over broken promises. And you're simply standing in front of the floodgates when it all breaks loose. Don't carry that burden. It's not your fault they buried their gifts. It's not your fault they ignored their calling. It's not your responsibility to absorb their bitterness. You just keep walking in grace. Keep doing what God called you to do. Because the very thing they hate in you is the very thing God is using to bless others. And when you start succeeding, especially after they counted you out, it shakes their foundation. They remember your quiet seasons, your storms, your silent struggles. And now that you're still standing, still praising, still moving forward, it confuses the enemy. Because you weren't supposed to make it, but here you are. Why? Because God had a plan. And no amount of envy can stop what He's set in motion. Understand this, the ones who envy you today may be the very people you once helped, encouraged, or lifted up. That's why it stings. Not because they changed, but because now you finally see the truth behind their applause. And that realization, it's a revelation. Because not everyone who claps is cheering for you. Not everyone who listens is learning from you. And not everyone who stays is standing with you. You've got to get to a place where your identity is rooted in God's approval, not people's acceptance, where your purpose stands firm in His promise and not people's opinions. He didn't call you to be popular, He called you to be faithful. He didn't raise you to blend in, He raised you to stand out. And sometimes that means being misunderstood. Sometimes that means being hated by the very ones you hoped would walk with you. But even if they envy you, even if they walk away, even if their love turns cold, God still honors obedience. He still rewards faithfulness. He still lifts up the humble. And in the end, it won't be their opinion that shapes your future, it'll be His promise. There will be moments when your growth becomes the reason someone turns against you. Not because you hurt them, Not because you failed them, but because your transformation reveals their stagnation. When you start healing, maturing, rising, they notice. And what they see reminds them of everything in themselves they've neglected, ignored, or refused to face. That's why people start hating you for simply doing better. It's not pride, it's not arrogance, it's the unintentional mirror you hold up by simply living in your purpose. Because growth doesn't just show what's blooming in you, it also reveals what's missing in others. When you begin to say no, where you used to say yes, when you set boundaries instead of bending over backwards, when you protect your peace instead of pleasing people, they feel it, and some won't like it. Why? Because they were more comfortable when you were smaller, quieter, more dependent. As long as you stayed broken, they felt whole. As long as you stayed confused, they felt wise. But when you start healing without their permission, when you start growing past their expectations, the dynamic shifts. That's when the silence starts. That's when support turns into sarcasm. That's when love starts to feel like distance. Because some people were never committed to the real you. They were committed to the version of you that made them feel better about themselves. And when that version fades, so does their presence. But don't stop, keep growing, keep rising. Let your growth disrupt what needs to be shaken, because the same God who raised you will keep you. And no amount of envy can unwrite what he's already written over your life. Have you ever noticed how some people become more distant, not because you've done something wrong, but because you finally stop needing to explain yourself? When you no longer overshare, when you stop pleading to be understood, when you decide to stop trying to translate your heart into a language someone has already chosen to misunderstand, that's when the shift happens. And it's loud. Not in words, but in tension. Because peace, real peace, provokes those who relied on your chaos. Choosing stillness, choosing to stop arguing and start living, doesn't sit well with everyone. Not because you've turned cold, but because you've stepped into a power they can't control. Your silence, though quiet, echoes in their insecurity. It forces them to confront parts of themselves. They've worked hard to ignore the jealousy. They masked with fake smiles, the comparisons they never dared admit, the resentment they buried beneath shallow support. And now, they don't know what to do with you. So, they say you've changed, they say you're cold, they say you're distant, but the truth? They're uncomfortable. They don't know how to function without your constant need for their validation. And this is where your silence becomes not just necessary, but holy. Sometimes, silence is the boundary that keeps your peace intact. Not to hurt, not to ignore, but to protect. Protect your spirit. Protect your calling. Protect your mind from the constant noise of others' expectations. There are seasons where God calls you to say less, because your next move isn't meant to be broadcast, it's meant to be blessed. Some people can't handle that. They're used to seeing your struggle, your tears, your breakdowns. And now that you stop bleeding in front of them, they call it betrayal. But it's not. It's healing, it's strength, it's growth. They'll say you're arrogant. They'll whisper that you've got an attitude. And maybe you don't attitude of peace. An attitude that understands silence doesn't mean defeat, it means discernment. Not every battle is worth fighting out loud. Not every truth needs to be defended. Sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is to say nothing and keep moving. People panic when they can't read you anymore. When your eyes stop pleading and your mouth stops explaining, it shakes them. Because their confidence was never in your strength, it was in your weakness. They felt big when you felt small. They felt secure when you felt lost. And now that you've found your footing, now that you've built boundaries they can't cross and closed doors they used to waltz through, they feel powerless. And that powerlessness turns to hate. They love the version of you that stayed behind them, the one whose dreams didn't rise higher than theirs, whose light didn't shine too brightly. As long as you stayed smaller, they could cheer. But the moment you grew, the moment your gifts opened and favor followed, envy crept in wearing the mask of concern. Envy is a quiet poison. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It hides behind shallow compliments, lurks in awkward silences, and shows up in the eyes that won't meet yours when you share good news. It's subtle but heavy, present but veiled. And most times, the hate you suddenly feel, it's not about who you are, it's about what you represent. You're not hated for your flaws, you're hated for your growth, for your favor, for your resilience, for daring to believe your life holds more than what others settled for. When someone's spirit is filled with disappointment and they see you walk with purpose, it agitates something in them. They start measuring their stagnation against your momentum. And rather than reflect, they project. Rather than repent, they resent. They call your joy, pride, your passion, arrogance, your discipline performative. Not because it's true, but because that's easier than admitting they stopped trying. Some people don't hate you, they hate the reflection of what they gave up on. When they see you getting back up after life knocked you down, when they watch you stay faithful in the fire, when they witness you pour everything into your purpose, it confronts what they buried. It exposes dreams they walked away from, promises they no longer pray over, courage they stopped chasing. Instead of letting that mirror lead them back to hope, they let it lead them to hostility. This world conditions us to compete, to compare, to measure, but your purpose was never about outshining anyone. You're just letting your light finally shine the way God always intended. And to those still living in shadows, your light feels like an attack. Your obedience to God irritates those who bow to fear. Your consistency feels like judgment to those who quit after one storm. Your joy feels fake to those who've forgotten how joy even feels. But don't let that discourage you. That hatred you feel, it's not about you. It's the overflow of their own regret, the grief of what they lost, the anger over what they thought they'd be by now. And you just happen to be in the path when that dam of frustration breaks. But don't carry their bitterness. Don't wear their disappointment. You're not the villain in their story, you're just the reminder of what they've silenced in themselves. Keep walking, keep shining. The very thing they hate in you is the very thing God is using to bless others. And when you start succeeding, especially after they counted you out, it shakes them to the core. They remember your silence, your struggle, your low moments, and they never expected you to rise. But here you are still standing, still serving, still shining. That confuses the enemy because you weren't supposed to survive. But God had a different plan. Let this be your reminder. Not everyone who claps is cheering. Not everyone who stays is loyal. And not everyone who listens is learning. Anchor your identity in God's voice, not their applause. You weren't called to be liked. You were called to be faithful. You weren't chosen to blend in. You were chosen to stand out. And yes, sometimes that means standing alone. Sometimes it means being hated by the very ones you once lifted. But obedience still honors God, and He still honors obedience. Let them envy. Let them talk. Let their love turn to hate if it must. Your purpose is not held in their handsets sealed by His promise. If we're being honest, sometimes the hate you feel isn't rooted in anything you've done wrong. It's born from the jealousy others carry toward your resilience. They watched you walk through storms that would have broken them. They expected you to fall and stay down. But you didn't. You showed up anyway. You served, you prayed, you believed, you loved, and that confuses them. It unsettles the darkness they still haven't confronted in their own lives. Because while they assumed your past would paralyze you, God used it to propel you, and now your survival makes them uncomfortable. Let's not forge it even. Jesus wasn't hated because He did wrong. He was hated because His righteousness forced others to face their sin. His presence didn't shout condemnation, but it stirred resistance, because truth does that. The same Spirit that lived in Him now works in you. So don't be shocked when your growth triggers suspicion. Don't be shaken when people withdraw, question your motives, or mock your movement. Their rejection is not your responsibility, and their confusion isn't your job to clarify. Your role is simple, but not easy. Love anyway, forgive anyway, pray anyway. Because the battle isn't you versus them, it's light versus darkness. And light doesn't argue with darkness. It just keeps shining, silently, steadily, refusing to be dimmed by their discomfort. So when people pull back without reason, when they look at you differently, when their tone shifts and the distance grows, don't jump to conclusions. Pause, pray, ask God for discernment, not defense. Because what you see on the surface often masks a war happening in the unseen. This is not the time to get petty, it's the time to get anchored. It's the moment to lean deeper into the one who sees it all and is still writing your story. You'll reach a place in your journey where the very ones you've loved deeply, the ones you prayed for, encouraged, supported, begin to slip away. They won't always announce it. It starts subtly. Shorter conversations, delayed replies, awkward silence, and suddenly they're gone, and you're left wondering, what did I do? But maybe it's not rejection. Maybe it's protection. Because God heard the conversations you didn't, right? He saw the hearts behind the smiles, and in His mercy, He allowed the distance, not to hurt you, but to preserve the mission He's placed in you. Some people were never called to your healed self. They were drawn to your brokenness. They bonded with the insecure version of you, the one who second-guessed everything, the one who lived to be liked. But now that you're healing, growing, thriving, it stirs something in them. Not because you're wrong, but because you're no longer the mirror that made them feel tall. Your light exposes the cracks they've ignored. And instead of confronting their stagnation, they distance themselves from your growth. It's easier to label you proud than admit they feel left behind. It's easier to say you've changed than face the reality that they haven't. When God elevates you, He doesn't always announce the separation loudly. Sometimes He allows the drift, the slow fade, the quiet withdrawal. And it's confusing because you thought they were loyal. You thought they were aligned, but God sees what you can't. He knows who's really clapping and who's secretly hoping you fall. So He removes them not out of cruelty, but compassion, to clear the space for those who can walk with you in truth. Some people were only ever comfortable when you were compromising. When you were lost, they felt found. When you were unsure, they felt wise. But now that you've found peace in God, now that you're walking in purpose, they don't know where to place you anymore. So they critique, they whisper, they label, but don't chase them. Don't try to explain what God is doing in your life to people who never had spiritual ears in the first place. Your journey isn't about gathering fans. It's about fulfilling your assignment. And when that assignment shifts, your circle will too. Not because they're bad, but because they're no longer aligned with where God is taking you. Yes, it hurts. It hurts when people you love turn cold, when they disappear without warning, when they twist your healing into arrogance and your boundaries into betrayal. But let them go with grace. Because what God is doing in you now requires space. Space to grow, space to breathe, space to rise. God is calling you higher. And not everyone is equipped to climb. That's not your burden to carry. You don't have to explain your elevation. You don't have to defend your discipline. Your identity isn't built on their opinions. It's rooted in the one who sent you. And the one who sends always sustains. And one day, maybe, the very ones who walked away will see it. They'll see what God was doing all along. But that's not your concern. Your role is to stay faithful, to keep moving, to keep trusting. Don't let their silence you. Don't let their absence distract you. Keep your heart soft. Keep your ears tuned to His voice. Because there's a peace, an unshakable peace that rises when you finally stop fighting to be understood and start resting in the truth that God already understands you completely. And when you live from that place, no amount of rejection can steal your purpose. When you stop chasing people and start chasing purpose, everything begins to shift, not just around you, but within you. Yes, the room may grow smaller, conversations may grow quieter, invitations might slow, and connections you thought were solid may fade. But in that shrinking, something sacred starts to expand, your spirit strengthens, your clarity sharpens, your soul grows still, but bold. And in that divine stillness, you start to see the loss of people not as rejection, but as preparation. God is making room, not subtracting to punish, but refining to equip. So if they walk away, let them. If the phone stops ringing, release it. If their distance grows louder than their support, bless them from afar. Because what God is building in you is too big to be confined by the limitations of people who can't understand your healing. It's deeper than their opinions, higher than their expectations, and stronger than their silence. You weren't called to please them, you were chosen to follow Him. And that path often requires separation. Keep your eyes fixed on the one who called you, not the ones who walked away. Let your heart stay tender. Don't let disappointment make you bitter. Let your steps be steady, ordered by the one who sees what's ahead and never wastes what's behind. He finishes what He started, and what He started in you isn't finished yet. You'll begin to notice that as your circle tightens, your purpose becomes clearer, the distractions lessen, the noise fades, and the voices that once drowned your direction are replaced with the quiet guidance of the Holy Spirit. It might be lonely at times, but it's not empty. God is in the silence, and He's speaking louder than ever. Don't be discouraged by those who couldn't continue with you. They played their part, their chapter mattered, but it's over. Don't drag dead weight into a new season. Don't tether your destiny to people who were only assigned to your history. Growth requires release, and obedience demands trust. Trust that God sees the motives you missed. Trust that He removes what you would have kept, not to wound you, but to make room for what's next. Trust that His pruning is protection and His silence is strategy. And when it hurts, when it really stings, remember this: your purpose is still intact. Their absence doesn't cancel your anointing. Their rejection doesn't rewrite your calling. You are still chosen, still sent, still covered. Let God do what only He can do. Let Him align your steps, shape your circle, and prepare your platform. And while He does, don't let bitterness build walls around your heart. Stay open, stay gracious, stay ready. Because what's ahead will require the full version of you, not the one who shrinks, but the one who stands. Purpose may cost you comfort, but it will reward you with peace. The kind of peace that doesn't flinch when people leave. The kind that doesn't fold when support vanishes. The kind that stands firm when misunderstanding rises. That's the peace of knowing who you are, whose you are, and why you were called in the first place. So walk on, even if you walk alone for a season. Speak truth, even if it's only heaven that echoes back. Love deeply, even when it isn't returned. And trust God entirely, because He never starts a work He doesn't intend to finish. You're not chasing applause anymore, you're following assignment. And in that obedience, your spirit will flourish, your mission will unfold, and your life will bear fruit no crowd could have ever given you. Eyes on Him, heart soft, spirit ready, purpose first. And when you live from that place, when you walk in that Risolvino amount of loss, can shake what's been divinely secured. Because you're no longer moved by who leaves, you're anchored by who stays. And hath the one who began the good work, He's still here, and He's not done yet.